Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Bolt with your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Today's topics are all about tropical cyclones once again, Fred's floods, Grace's strengthening, and Henri's shift. Sit back and relax and enjoy today's Daily Bolt. So once again, we are focused on the tropics, and we have still three systems to talk about, though Fred is rapidly transitioning from being a tropical cyclone to being what we call an extratropical cyclone, typical mid-latitude cyclone that we have most of the year running through the United States, Canada, and the adjacent ocean areas. The type of weather systems that have attendant cold fronts, warm fronts, stationary fronts, etc. And there's not too much to talk about with respect to Fred. We will go ahead to the next slide and make a point of noting that Fred is basically still considered a tropical depression for now. It has winds of about 30 miles per hour at a few points in the circulation, but for the most part, the circulation is starting to spin down. It's been kind of a slow decline through the day today, and what we had been afraid of yesterday and earlier is that Fred is mostly a rainmaker coming into some areas of the eastern part of the country, notably the southern central Appalachians, the Cumberland Plateau, and the adjacent Piedmont areas that have already had a relatively wet July and August, such that an input of too much more rain will bring about some flash flooding issues, as well as urban and small stream flooding throughout the Appalachian Mountains from North Carolina up through Pennsylvania and New York, and even extending later on in the week into New England. And there are flash flood watches out for much of the spine of the Appalachians through West Virginia, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and those will be extended farther to the north and east. These actually also include the Washington, D.C. area, so significant rain there will cause some urban flooding and significant problems for commuting for those of you who live in that area. Grace and Henri are still full-fledged tropical storms. Grace is exiting a path that took it basically directly over Jamaica. This is farther south than had been forecast yesterday, and that has resulted in a continued southward shift in the expected track of Grace as we go on. Grace has become a relatively strong tropical storm. It has maximum winds now of about 60 miles per hour. And as you can see here in this image, which has actually been reversed, I don't know how that happened on this particular PowerPoint. It wasn't reversed when I pasted it in there. But if you look at this from a little different perspective, we have the island of Jamaica here, Florida and the United States are here, the Bahamas are here, and Grace is actually moving on this particular figure from left to right. And I think I'm going to stop and switch this around so that you can see this the correct way, and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, there we are. That's much better. One of those things when you drag a picture across a slide on a PowerPoint, sometimes it inverts itself. So here's Grace, there's Cuba, Hispaniola, and Jamaica is basically obscured for the most part. There's the island that you can sort of maybe make it out a little bit there. The important part is that Grace has now getting a well-defined central area of deep thunderstorms, deep convection we call it, and significant banding features. So it has weakened a little bit going over Jamaica, but not very much, and it is expected to continue to strengthen, even though there are competing factors in terms of the environment of Grace regarding intensification. The air around Grace is not as moist as would be ideal for a rapid intensification scenario for any tropical system. It's a little drier. You can see some of the areas here where it's pretty much devoid of any clouds, and those dry intrusions will act as a little bit of a brake on the development of Grace. However, it is moving into an area south of Cuba, well south of Cuba, in the southwestern part of the Caribbean Sea, with very warm sea surface temperatures, and that energy will provide for enough fuel for Grace to continue to intensify over the next couple of days as it approaches the state of Quintana Roo in Mexico. And for those of you who don't know where that state is, you may know where Cancun and Cozumel are. And so Grace is headed for landfall a bit south of Cancun and Cozumel, but still potentially close enough for there to be considerable impacts, given that the latest forecast for Grace, given these warm ocean temperatures helping to intensify the system even in the face of a little bit of shear, but more importantly drier air, is that Grace will get to a borderline Category 1, Category 2 hurricane with maximum winds of about 90 miles an hour when it slams into the coast of Mexico. Up here farther to the right is Tropical Storm Henri, which actually has slightly stronger vertical winds. Sorry, not vertical winds, slightly stronger horizontal winds. Excuse me, I was losing my voice there for a second. So you see me there grab a little bit of tea to fortify my voice. But there's some tiny bits of banding as well with Henri, and it is currently a 65 mile per hour tropical cyclone. Henri's environment is even less conducive to strengthening. It's dealing with some dry air, it's dealing with stronger shear, and the ocean heat content, while warm, is not as warm as what Grace is going to be going over. What we anticipate for Henri is that it will maintain its intensity for the most part over the next 2 to 3 days as it slowly approaches the Atlantic coast. And the big change for the forecast for Henri is that each forecast cycle is seeing the progression of Henri get closer and closer to the Atlantic coast. Not close enough that it's going to be a problem in terms of a direct hit, but in terms of raising the wave activity, the swells along the coast, and bringing some increase in the winds overall along much of the Atlantic coast, especially New England, and also maritime areas of Canada. And we'll see this a bit more on the next slide. So we have the track forecast for Grace and Henri. I don't have one for Fred because effectively Fred is going to follow the spine of the Appalachians up into New England over the next couple of days and eventually completely transition into, as what I called before, an extratropical low mid-latitude cyclone. We see the track forecast for Grace, again, becoming a hurricane roughly by about this time tomorrow, maintaining hurricane status and strengthening through Category 1 level winds and being very close to Category 2 status, or maybe even slightly into the Category 2 wind range with maximum winds somewhere in the 90 mile per hour range as it comes in to the Mexican state of Quintana Roo, crosses the entire Yucatan Peninsula, goes into the Bay of Campeche, or the Gulf of Campeche, it's called both, depending on who you talk to, re-intensifying into a Category 1 hurricane before then making a second landfall on the east central coast of Mexico, crossing the entirety of Mexico before gradually dissipating as it's crossing the Sierra Madre Occidental mountain range very close to the resort city of Puerto Vallarta. Henri has a bit more of a complicated track in that it is currently moving ever so slightly west-southwest, about 8 miles per hour. It's not going to be moving much faster than that before it starts making a very slow turn during the day on Friday, and eventually starts moving more close to the Gulf Stream and the Atlantic coast. And while this center position of Henri is still relatively far offshore, it's a very big envelope because the numerical prediction models are having significant disagreements on exactly how strong the ridge that Henri is traveling around will be in upper levels and how far west it will go. So the westernmost part of this envelope is fairly close to parts of the New England and Canadian maritime coastline. And again, the expectation is that Henri will have enough of an area of enhanced winds that there will be, at the very least, a substantial increase in the swell activity, wave heights along the Atlantic seaboard, and there could be some dangerous conditions for swimmers, surfers, and boaters. We will keep an eye on Henri. We have several days to go before we worry even about the turn, let alone anything else. And by that point, Grace will have already made a landfall in Mexico and be headed slowly towards a second landfall. That's all for tonight's Daily Bolt. We'll keep you posted on the tropical systems. Tomorrow we may well have a different topic. Take a break from the tropics for a day before coming back on Thursday. As Grace has impacted Mexico by that point in all likelihood. We'll see. But for now, this is Dr. Jeff Tilley. It's the Daily Bolt. Have a good night, good morning, good afternoon, and God bless.